I'm really excited to see all of you here. Really appreciate being asked back by Catalyst. I figured that was a good sign. And just it's exciting to be in a room full of folks who want to do the hard work of creating a better world. And so I'm honored to be here with you. I also just wanted to bring Ann Braden into the room a little bit and honor her. I first met this white Southern anti-racist activist when I was in grade school, and was lucky to get to work with her over the period of several decades. And she worked with us both in a loving way and in a challenging way, and both have been very important. A couple of things that she would always talk about was that as a white Southern woman, it was critical to discover that her country was wrong, and that the first piece she discovered her country was wrong on was race, and that created for her the opportunity to look at everything else that was wrong. She also talked about having to turn herself inside out, and she would say, it's a painful process, but it's not destructive, because you get to join what she called the other America, or the other world. And it wasn't Michael Harrington's other world, but it was the world of folks who were resisting. And the final thing that she would say was, she said, I was born privileged in a class society, and for her that was a prison. And she was born white in a racist society, and that was a prison. And one of the most important things she taught those of us who are white is that we have to do this for ourselves. We have to free ourselves. I was born into a family of class and race privilege with a Dutch Oma who hid anti-Nazi resistance members under her floorboards and parents who were active in the civil rights and anti-war movements. I discovered early on that my family had much more than we needed, and far too many people didn't have enough. I'd been active for over a decade and a half in work like the Free the Wilmington 10, anti-apartheid student organizing, affordable housing, runaway shop struggles, international solidarity work, and voting rights organizing, when I first carried a bullhorn chanting racism, sexism, we say no, homophobia's got to go, in Louisville's first gay and lesbian march in the mid-'80s. I wasn't out to my family, and I was still coming out to myself. I was a board member of the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and we were working to get the Klan members off of the police force. In those conversations 25 years ago with Ann Braden and civil rights leader Bob Cunningham and others in Louisville, we talked a lot about how could we engage more white people in the struggle against racism. Historically and in our organizing, we saw that over and over again, it was racism that divided people who should be standing together, and that white people were providing both the silence and the overt affirmation for the oppressive structures to stay in place despite our work to try and change them. Whether it was police abuse, voting rights, or economic justice, we came to believe that building an anti-racist majority was going to be key to making progress on any issue that any of us cared about. And that meant we had to get more white people to understand our stake in fighting white supremacy too. I want to tell a story about how a long-term campaign for something, in this case it happened to be LGBT equality in Louisville, Kentucky, and in Kentucky, can be built in a way that keeps large numbers of people engaged over time, gets white people to identify our self-interest in fighting racism, and brings more white people into anti-racism work, and allows us to use the political power created, I appreciated that you were talking about this here, in support of an anti-racist economic justice agenda. In 1991, the overall goal when we launched the Fairness Campaign was to win a piece of legislation, basic jobs, housing, and affordable open accommodations protections for LGBT people. There was not a shred of legal protection for folks in Louisville at that point. But seeing these politics of race and class privilege when we looked at a lot of the gay organizing around the country, that it was dominated by race and class privilege. And we knew that we wanted and needed our efforts in Louisville to be and look different than that. At that time, leading up to the Fairness Campaign in the early 90s, with rare exceptions, no one was winning anything anywhere. The politics were framed by, and some of this sounds so familiar when I think back to it, the war on Iraq, welfare reform, gays in the military, the Defense of Marriage Act, and around the country, the radical rights recruitment numbers were growing. They were exploiting homophobia within marginalized communities and racism within the gay organizing to advance an agenda that was about racism, war, and cutting taxes for the rich. And in our region, LGBT rights were considered an impossible struggle, even among many of us. But after 15 years of struggle, in a southern town, like too many that are often written off by our brothers and sisters on the east and west coasts, thousands of folks mobilized, lobbied, protested, went door to door, got arrested in civil disobedience actions. And in 1999, we finally won one of the most progressive laws of its kind in the country, covering both sexual orientation and gender identity. And on the one hand, the fairness win was a very necessary advance of human rights. But I also think there's another part of the story that matters for movement building more generally, and especially for places like Louisville around this country. And that story is that the Fairness Campaign would not have been successful. We would not have won this legislation if it wasn't for a commitment to an inclusive intersectional vision and a strategy with anti-racism at its core. The experience that white people have coming into the fairness work is that we learn that our own self-interest in being treated decently is connected to supporting efforts led by people of color and to building relationships across lines of difference. In almost 30 years of peace and justice work, I have come to believe that one of the most powerful experiences to change our world personally and politically is where we put our bodies. And in the fairness work, we make space for this to happen. And white people change because of it. We change standing on a picket line for minority contracts and hiring at 7 a.m. day after day next to someone who does not look like us. We change when in all our queerness we join striking UFCW members outside the Fisher Packing Company, flyer a gay bar that's hosting a white comedian in blackface, or struggle with LGBT people about opposing the death penalty or militarization. We change when we keep showing up for someone who may not trust us yet and who later testifies on behalf of LGBT equality at City Hall. And we change when black, brown, and white lesbians get arrested protesting police abuse, together with a black minister and a mother whose son was stomped to death by the city jailers. In the years of struggle to pass anti-discrimination legislation and to do it in a way that grew the base for anti-racism and economic justice, fairness volunteers knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors throughout Louisville. We talked to people not just about LGBT fairness, but about a living wage and an end to police abuse. This not only grew our power politically as we proved to resistant elected officials that we had support among the voters, but it proved transformational on other levels as well. When someone opens their door and on their doorstep is a team that might look like Darnell and Larry, a 6'3" black gay fairness leader, and a 5' by 3' white straight carpenter union guy, talking about queer rights, decent wages, and stopping the killings by cops of young black men, that person at the door has an experience. Those two volunteers have an experience in having each other's back in that moment. Recently, in an effort to build solidarity with migrant people under attack in Arizona, fairness leaders helped launch People Not Profiles, a multiracial coalition. In one action, the public education piece included those of us who were white taking the lead in asking other whites on busy Louisville streets for their papers, that they had to show us their papers. And using this as an entree to address the injustice of the Arizona law in terms of who would really be targeted. Fairness organized a community dialogue to help LGBT people understand why we were standing in solidarity with migrant people, and carried a front-page newsletter article making the connections between migrant rights and LGBT rights. Based on the groundwork laid when Kentucky, shortly thereafter, faced our own version of SB 70, fairness members joined POC-led mobilizations, and together the activists defeated the hate legislation that had been sailing through the legislature. What we see happen in fairness is relationships develop across lines of difference between individuals and groups that were previously rare or considered impossible. We begin to build power for an inclusive justice agenda and create opportunities to leverage this fairness political clout for, among other things, passage of a living wage, police reform, and in a state where the Democratic Party is dominated by blue dog Democrats, the election of progressives, including working class and progressives of color. Our efforts to do LGBT work with a broad justice vision with anti-racism as its core has come under attack from white gay men in particular. When we joined a boycott of Kentucky Fried Chicken for its abysmal black hiring and franchising policies, we were criticized by national gay groups who said, wait a minute, KFC has sexual orientation in its policies, so you shouldn't be targeting them. KFC itself tried to negotiate separately with fairness to fix our grievances with them, only to find out that not only would we refuse to go around the black leadership by talking to them directly, but that our grievances included racism as well. There were times we've lost funding, received hate mail from gay supporters for challenging white supremacy. But each of these challenges became an opportunity to broaden the conversation. Some white men and women in fairness will tell you that doing the work in this way, or the visibility of lesbian and transgender leadership in fairness, does not seem gay enough, or made them uncomfortable. But LGBT people and allies with privilege also support the Fairness Campaign with its anti-racist agenda, because we've been able to build a broad-based effort that wields political power to make concrete changes that impact their lives, and because our work has helped shift the anti-gay atmosphere in Louisville. And perhaps of more long-lasting importance in our struggle to build an anti-racist majority is that in the long march to transform our society in deeper ways, there are many who say that being part of fairness has changed their worldview and who they see as family forever.